Hey, hello, and welcome everybody to our August, Wednesday, the 16th Climate Action Network event. Our event today is being presented by Max Gruenig. He is a friend and a local neighbor of mine here in Charlottesville. And the title for our hour today is Selling Green Better. The tagline being, how do we communicate effectively the benefits of sustainable and energy efficiency to our prospective buyers? So, just a quick note, this session is being recorded and is being streamed on Workplace, The World, and the DEI YouTube channel. If you have questions throughout the session, you should see a link to the Slido. Type them in there and then they'll be presented to us at the end. Before I introduce my friend and Max, I'd like to share a bit about Climate Action Network Group, also known as CAN. For those of you who don't know, we were started just 13 months ago. And we currently have 462 members. That's an amazing growth for a group in 13 months. We're a community of agents, staff, partners, and enthusiastic folks who care about the environment. And our goal and mission is to network, educate, collaborate, and inspire climate action on all different levels. We're looking for members. There's lots of ways to participate. You can find opportunities in leadership, graphic design, content creation, event creation, even project management, sustainability, oh gosh, and so much more. Just check us out, fill out the information, and we'll have a one-on-one conversation with you. We're here to help propel eXp Realty to become a global leader in sustainability and climate action. And the one way that we are also doing that is by hosting events like this one today. Max, just a little bit about him, is a senior policy advisor at the E3G Washington office, and they focus on US and EU, excuse me, I'm getting all these acronyms, climate diplomacy in a global context. I'm going to let Max explain that a little bit more. But I like to think of Max as connecting the dots in the areas of climate, trade, and development. Max is a trained accountant with a focus on emissions trading and game theory. Outside of work, he enjoys gardening and what he calls experimental cooking and baking. Maybe we'll learn more. Max is the founder of his passion project, a nonprofit by the name of POCACITO, Post-Carbon Cities of Tomorrow. And POCACITO represents a portfolio of projects that all work towards the same goal, leveraging the diversity and dynamism of the world's cities for us to discover and share urban solutions for sustainability for the 21st century. Now, with that said, I want to thank you, Max, for joining us today. And as we get started, I'd like to ask you two questions before I turn the floor over to you. Are you ready?
Ready.
Fantastic. So I always like to know ahead of time, why are we talking about this today? Why are we talking about selling green better?
Pam, thank you. And thank you also for inviting me and having me here today, and also for being interested in my cooking and baking adventures. So
Yeah.
why are we here today? If you want to say it in one sentence, it's because homes that are greener sell for a higher price. And you could probably also look into other metrics, whether they sell faster or whether they clear more easily. That I don't know. That would be some additional research, but it's definitely all different aspects that could be compelling enough to stay on the call and listen in.
Great. Thank you. And one other question is, I'm sure there's some insights that we can, as the audience, take away. What is one hope that you think people will leave with from your topic?
So this is a whole house approach. So we don't look just at energy. Of course, energy is very important, but there are also many other aspects that are relevant. That can be the indoor air quality, that can be the materials used, the life cycle assessment of the materials, it can be the whole setting of the building. So it's many different aspects. So think broader. And so that also means there can be something green in a house, even if it doesn't have solar panels on the roof. It's not just one dimension.
Great. Thank you. Well, Max, I'm gonna turn this over to you, and I'll be here if you need me.
Well, Pam, thank you so much. And I hope you come back later. And also, of course, I want to encourage everybody to ask many questions. And I'll be happy to hopefully answer them. Can't promise that I have the answer to every question, but at least we can try. Great. So we already talked about how today we're talking about selling green better. But of course, that's a very, very brief title. So what does it actually mean? It's about the benefits of sustainable and energy efficient buildings for prospective buyers and how to communicate these effectively. So with that being said, I mean, Pam already revealed this in the beginning. I'm an economist, I'm not an architect, and I'm not a building engineer, and I'm not a real estate, not a realtor. So feel free to ask anything, but don't expect me to be directly deep into the building codes or any of these aspects, but just sharing some of my experiences here, and maybe also a little bit on the background. So I'm originally from Germany, and so a lot of my career focus, I don't want to say all of my career focus, but it could be true in many ways, is on this transatlantic and international learning and knowledge exchanges. So a lot is about bringing people together, seeing how it's being done elsewhere, which means both getting Europeans to the US, but also getting Americans to Europe to have a look at things in practice. Obviously, this has changed a little bit over the pandemic, so a lot more online activity. And now we're in this hybrid world where we have some in person and some online. And I think combining the best of two worlds, basically. So let's get started and try and see some of the um, um, yeah, some of the reasons why one could be interested in having a green home to begin with. So next slide, please. Yeah, so on the picture here, this is actually a home in Virginia, in Northern Virginia. I'm not going to say exactly where out of privacy reasons, but it's a very interesting home. And if you're interested, I could arrange for a tour. The owner of the building is the gentleman with the beard, Scott Sklar. He is an energy expert, so his houses focus on energy aspects. And he has, I mean, this is really hard to imagine, but he has various kinds of solar panels on the roofs, including solar tiles, including also solar panels or cells that are integrated into glass surfaces. Um, and then he has wind power. He has a actually a wind turbine on his. It is in a residential neighborhood, and uh, no alarm here. He has a fuel cell in his building, which is in a residential area, which means fuel cell. If I say fuel cell, that means hydrogen used for generating electricity. So this is very interesting. Of course, he also has geothermal energy use. And of course, he has a heat pump and. So this is almost like a lab, an experimental home, but he lives there. And you can see in the background the home. It's a standard home. It's not like uh, it's not something you would see necessarily in a film or a TV show about net zero homes. This is the opposite. This is just a normal home that's been significantly upgraded, including a compartment with batteries in the basement, etc. So it's very interesting, just to tease you here, what can be possible. Of course, you don't have to go all the way there. But even small steps can be relevant. So why do we want greener homes? Well, one is, of course, you can just be in the mindset to have a green home. This can be your conviction. You want to do something for you, for the planet, for your neighborhood, or whatever. This is, of course, everybody's right. And then it can also be very selfish. It can be for comfort and health considerations. You might say, oh, I don't want to have a drafty home. Or you can say, I don't want a home where I smell chemicals, etc. And then, of course, there can be also the motivation that you say, oh, I want to increase the value and I want to have a home that increases in value more than the average home. So this could be all motivations that can be, of course, combined. But it also shows you that the buyer for a greener home can come from different perspectives, which means when you try to sell to somebody, it's good to find out what direction they come from, what their motivation is, and whether they want to look at lower running costs and lower maintenance costs, or they want to look at being cutting edge in technology and having like the technical maximum of what's possible. And of course, you want to emphasize different aspects differently to these different characters or types of potential buyers. So let's look at the next slide, please. Okay. So yeah, I said it in the beginning when Pam asked my key take-home message. So this is basically here on the slide again. So we have, you could structure it differently if you wanted to. I see it has three areas. So one is about the energy systems, and that's what most people talk about or think about when they say green home. They think about all the energy aspects. Of course, now, of course, the most visible is if you have solar panels on a home, right? That's something people see right away. And of course, that has also appeal, and we'll come back to that, that you can actually point to this right away. But there's so much more. There's also more or less hidden aspects. If we look at the building envelope, meaning the walls, the windows, everything, the roof, there can be things that are not visible either from the out or the inside, but they're really relevant. And then, of course, the building is usually on a lot surrounded by something more. So there is green space. It can be, of course, also a desert garden, but let's call it a green space or the surrounding landscape, whatever that is. So think of this basically in three dimensions. So we have what people might call the core, and where we have now also a lot of incentives and a lot of focus and a lot of attention, the energy system. And of course, that's also where you can achieve a lot, just taking that individually. But then if you really want to maximize the impact, the benefits, you actually have to think all three together. And only then will you have a truly green home. So in other words, you can't really have a fully green home if you only think about the energy system, but you also have to think about how is it integrated, how does it work together. Yeah, let's go look at some evidence that has been around recently. Um, of course, there's not just one way to prove that your home is green. Of course, you can also do it without certification, right? You can just say, look, this is the electricity bill, this is the gas bill. They're basically zero for the last year. And people will believe, okay, that's a green home. But to simplify things, and if people don't want to share utility bills, etc., there are also certification schemes that are widely accepted and widely known, or at least some of them. I mean, LEED, you probably have heard of it. It's definitely one of the best known building certification standards in the US, which exists also for family or single family homes. Then there is the Energy Star certification, which is also available for new homes. And then there's the DOE certification, Zero Energy Ready Home. And then there's something that is the um, also by the Department of Energy, a certification scheme that is built on a they call it actually like a miles per gallon or efficiency scale. So you have this home energy score system, and you can see it on the slide. And actually, on this slide, there are two scores displayed on the right. One is before a retrofit or renovation took place. The score was only 3. And then with the measure, the score improved to 7. So you can see here a higher score in this home energy score is better. So, and then it displays also, just like on the car fuel efficiency label, it displays the running cost, so to speak, for this building. This also is just a recommendation by the Department of Energy and is actually implemented differently at the state and local level. And it's just guidance, it's just a tool to work with. And of course, there are many more, especially also there are industry-led standards, and there are also, of course, standards in other countries. And there's almost a confusion of different standards, which again can make it difficult both for you as the agent, but also for buyers. So it's also important to have at least a minimum knowledge to explain what these standards mean and don't mean, not to make them less interesting, but actually to help the user or the potential buyer understand better what it means, because they may have heard the word or they have seen the Energy Star label maybe on their electric appliances, but they may have no real idea what it means when we're talking about a house. And the same thing with this home energy score, that might make a lot of sense from a Department of Energy perspective. But you really have to make sure that people actually know what this is about, for it to actually make an impact, to actually land this. Because otherwise, people will nod and smile and then think, well, I guess that doesn't really matter. And people don't always ask if they don't understand. And same, I mean, you've seen that too, probably. Sometimes people just, they think, okay, let's get to something important. But you have to assume that people don't know exactly what it means unless they come from the trade themselves. And again, of course, there are many other standards, and I'm not saying these are the only ones that you should have an eye on, but I think these are the core ones to be aware of. And of course, we don't have to be experts in each of them, but I think having a basic understanding will help you. Now, of course, Pam asked at the beginning, what's my key message here? And I said that green homes sell for more. And so I say yes with an exclamation mark here. There's different evidence. And of course, the problem here is these are statistical evidences. So there's like a pool of buildings they took, and you never have a guarantee on each individual home. That's the problem with these statistical findings, that on average, yes, on average, they found, for example, in a Berkeley lab in a study in 22, that when you increase the home energy score 1 point on that scale, you increase the sales price by 0.5%. Or looking at the other side, these running costs, if your energy bills are $100 higher, this lowers the home price by 0.4%. And of course, that's very good, but that doesn't mean it's always that way. So you both have regional differences, and of course, each home is different, and then each buyer is different. But you know this better than I do. So this, of course, just gives you a direction. But there is a price premium. And there are other studies, such as by Zillow, showing that adding PV increases the home value significantly. And then also another study by Zillow shows that home buyers consider energy efficiency a key issue, 67%, which sounds like a lot, but it is ranked number 12. So obviously this is important, but it's not the number one criterion. And so, I mean, understandably so. So it's important, but it can be a decision factor, an important one in the mix. And so you also have to see it, how does it perform, how does it rank in the whole picture of the building? So you don't want to just sell it on that fact alone. It still has to be the right size, the right price, and the right location. So obviously many other points that are more important. Still, it is important, and it's increasing, and 67% is kind of a high score still before we go into the lesser relevant aspects. So I would say that's enough reason to have a closer look, but we can look at some more as evidence on the next slide. That's from Freddie Mac, a little older, from 2019, but they found that just being energy rated at all already improved the home value, which is interesting too. So transparency is already a first step. And then they found that better ratings produce higher sales prices. And the other part, the third part, is particularly interesting also if it's, of course, if the question is about financing. Owners of energy efficient homes are less likely to default on a mortgage. And that can also translate, of course, in better financing options as well. I mean, you can also sell it, of course, to the buyer that way, that they have more money to pay down the mortgage if they spend less on the utilities. So yeah, let's just see on the next slide. So on your side, this is where it gets maybe less fun, because there's basically homework for you. So buyers will want to know too, agents are versed in what it means, what is a green home. And of course, it's not like it's not a requirement per se, but it can help you if you are actually firmly um, familiar in what you're talking about. Meaning, yes, it's not the number one criterion, but if you can show what you're talking, you know what you're talking about, then you can really actually land something. So, have you taken any special training? I mean, feel free to list this session, but of course, more can be done. And then also, of course, do you have a track record of selling energy efficient homes? Do you know green terminology? You'll hear some today here, but of course, there's a lot more. And also, evolving field, obviously. And then you yourself can be certified as well. As with everything, there's no single standard, just listing two here. The green designation by the National Association of Realtors, or there's also, by I mentioned before, LEED has also a green associate certification. These, of course, aren't free, and you have to learn and study for them and take an exam. But this is just to say that's also something you can do on your end to actually substantiate that you know what you are talking about. And with that, let's jump into what we actually mean by the green home. So let's look first the energy system aspect. So energy systems is, of course, it's a wide field because it's anything, can be electricity, can be heat and heating and cooling. And of course, that is kind of diverse because it can be all electric. It doesn't have to be, and it can still be a green home. So we're talking here both about renewable energy generation, and it's in most cases that's simply solar PV on the roof. But as I've told you, this home at the very beginning does have a mini wind turbine in the backyard. And yes, this can be permitted. And yes, that is possible. If it makes sense, it's a totally different story. But I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily end there. And of course, you can also count other aspects in here, such as biomass or other renewable energy in the home setting. Now, of course, heating and cooling, this can be electric and it can be based, for example, on a heat pump for heating and cooling. And that can be either for the sourcing, for the heat source, for the heat pump. It can be geothermal and or water-based, and it can be air-based, so ambient air. So these are very different approaches, different complexity, but also different performance in different climate zones. And it's very, very important. I didn't have a map with the climate zones, but I know you're all over the place. And obviously, different climate zones require very different settings for the energy system and for the whole greenhouse design. So it's not just one size fits all. In some climate zones, solar thermal is an option for heating the water. So this is a very attractive option. But is less subsidized, so it's less common. It's usually an on-roof system. And then also, if you have a ventilation system that connects to the outside, there can be a heat exchanger. The heat exchanger can also be applied to the wastewater stream to collect some of the exhaust or excess heat from the water. And then last but not least, you can also have a heat pump for generating hot water. So to electrify hot water generation and still have the benefits of a heat pump. Just for background, I mean, most of you will know because heat pumps are all over now, but and they're also fairly common in the US already. But still, it's a system that works similar to the refrigerator. So it's with condensing and decompression of a medium that you can actually amplify either the cold or the hot significantly. And so you can actually use very little energy input and generate a lot of heat or cooling as the result. Still need electricity, so you definitely, if you have heat pumps, it's interesting to combine it with renewables, but you don't have to. Of course, you can also use grid power for that. If you have renewables, a battery system is also a very good consideration, especially with solar, obviously. It generates power during the sun time, during the day. And so for nighttime use, battery systems can be interesting. But it's also, of course, something to be resilient against power outages. And Pam, you're in Charlottesville, so in Charlottesville, for example, we do have power outages because of trees that fall over. It's nothing dramatic, but for some households, it's kind of an important factor to always have power. And in some locations, you can have longer power outages, of course, so battery systems can be interesting there. Going a step further in the home house electrification, EV charger is also another option to add to your home energy system. And then, of course, when you want to go to, oh, we digitize everything and have it all on an app, if you have a fully integrated system, that's then when you move towards a smart home energy system where you can actually balance when does the cooling, the AC run, when does the dishwasher run, when do I make hot water, and when do I scale back everything. So this can be automated or user controlled, but definitely it's not a requirement. So you can do this step by step or use particular aspects. In theory, you can also do smart home before doing any renewable and any battery and any heat pump solution. So things can be combined or not. So it's not necessary to do it all at once or in a specific order. Of course, economics will drive when to do what. Okay, let's look at the next one. So now we have the energy system. And now you have the whole house. With a smart home system, we already breached a little bit on into this terrain where it's talking about the whole system. So then, of course, you have the walls, you have the windows, you have the roof, and you also have the foundation of the building. So the whole thing of home insulation comes into play here. And this can be very simple, like just spray in attic insulation. That can be like this, small affair. You can also fill all the walls, the outer walls. And of course, you can go further, energy efficient windows. You can really invest a lot of money there, of course, but you also get a lot for that. And of course, it has multiple benefits again and again. For example, you have less heating up in of the room, also less cold sensation when you sit by a window in the winter. And of course, high efficiency windows can also be safer in case debris falls onto the window. So there are multiple benefits to consider here for different use cases. And of course, I say here triple pane, it doesn't have to be triple pane. There are energy efficient windows also that are only double pane. So you just have to look at it. Department of Energy has a very extensive list on their website. And again, you don't have to have this all figured out. If you have these certifications for a building done, then obviously some of this will have to be ticked before by a building engineer. If you look more holistically, you can also design the house from the get-go as a passive solar design, meaning that, for example, at low sun in the winter, the sun comes in easily into the room, but with an overhang in the summer, the sun doesn't shine into the room. You can have, for example, um, a south side that's specifically designed, depending on the climate zone, to either capture a lot of sunlight or create a lot of shade, and vice versa, the northern facade, different design elements to really work the most out of this. Of course, there are limitations depending on where the lot is and what the grade on the lot is, etc., what you can realistically do. And then you have local building ordinances and zoning requirements where you have certain parameters you can only work with. Still, there's a lot that can be done here. When you go inside the building, there too, carpeting, wall materials, paint used. Volatile organic compounds are massive health risk, and some people like this smell, but it is actually hazardous for your health. And so going to low VOC materials can be really an important part of green building. It doesn't have to mean only natural materials. It can also include synthetic materials with lower uh, VOC emissions. And again, these can be certified. And this is something that you can point out too. And people have more allergies and have more asthma and respiratory chronic diseases. So this is actually something that's very important and can be really sold up to users or buyers. Um, Another thing that has less imminent direct benefits is whether the house uses recycled materials or whether the building materials can be recycled in the future. This is about thinking the house more of basically a living being that has a beginning, an end, and then something else comes after. So not just in the moment, but about the life cycle of the whole building and its materials. That also includes, can items be repaired? And that's very interesting because sometimes when you have very complex materials, I'm talking here about insulation materials, but also other high-tech materials that are glued together or soldered together, they cannot be repaired easily. So then you cannot actually fix any leak or any cracks, but you have to replace, for example, a whole pane of a facade panel, and different materials are more repair friendly maybe, but that's also something to be considered. It's not just saying black or white, it's really looking at the whole picture. And then the last point, and that's of course that's tough for you to breach this as a topic, but footprint and square footage. So this is of course, people always like more, or generally like more. They like bigger homes, they like to have a lot of space, but it's kind of obvious that heating and cooling and lighting a smaller space, no matter what, saves a lot of energy and also a lot of money. And also a smaller building with less footprint, of course, there's less runoff, there's less sealed surface. There's a lot of benefits to that. Plus, you can have more homes on less space. But of course, this is not always something that can be sold easily as a plus. So be aware. Just you can test where this preferences are of the buyer, but this can be actually something to also sell up because a smaller home is, of course, also easier to maintain and manage, and can be, right sizing. I think right sizing is maybe the right word here because you don't want to have people feel like they're uh, suffering or giving up anything, but it's also avoiding excess, right? What's the right size for the home? So that's my last point here. But now let's move outside of the home on the next one. So the house is, of course, in a whole setting, a landscape. And it can be very small in a townhouse setting with just a very small front door, 10 square foot garden, maybe, but it can also be significantly more. And think about pollinator friendly plants and a chemicals free garden. Use also native species, preferably. Of course, that's changing too with a changing climate situation, but still try to go local there. And also, I mentioned this before, the passive solar design, but you can also use trees and other plants to create shade in the right spaces and also improve the indoor climate. The green facade or green roof can also cool and also retain water. And overall, low impact landscaping can have major benefits for animals and plants around the house. And that also includes low to no irrigation, depending on your climate zone. Again, in some areas, this is already mandatory. In some, it's recommended, and some have no issue with water shortages. But still, it's also a maintenance bonus to have less to irrigate. That links very nicely to the question of rainwater collection. And actually, in a lot of places, you get benefits for retaining rainwater, collecting it, managing it so it doesn't run off into the street, into the sewer system. But of course, again, it also has benefits for you if you can use it for irrigation and other uses. Water features in itself can also be beneficial for the biodiversity around the building. But of course, can also be a challenge, right? You have to see what's possible and what's also safe insurance wise. But this can all be part of selling something as a green home. And last but not least, we all have driveways around homes, and very often they're impermeable. And so, having instead a permeable driveway or patio that also has a water retention reservoir underneath can be a huge benefit for a building. Smaller add ons, but they're very easy to achieve, is like, is there a composting facility, and is there bike parking outside the building? These are like easy ones to just add on for like a couple $100 at most, and can have, you change the whole messaging. If you put a bike rack outside a home, even if there's not much else, I mean, I don't want to say don't put anything else, but this is actually something just like solar, it's visible. So you also want to look, of course, a lot into psychology and messaging, right? And with certain elements are invisible, and then it's just for the owner's knowledge and own information. And it's good to know and good to have the right choices. And if it saves money, that's even better. But some is also about messaging. And so that can be very important for signaling preferences to the neighbors, to visitors, to everybody. I think these are kind of the main considerations here. I definitely want to give time so we can answer a few questions if we do have any questions. And yeah, I want to just say I hope this gave a little bit of an idea of what all can be part of a green home. And of course, that's not a complete list. There are many aspects that you could consider as well. And of course, this is also changing over time and also different if we talk about apartments, multifamily or single family homes. So definitely. I see a first question coming up. Um, yeah, the utility savings of a green home. I mean, literally, um, with solar on the roof and net metering with a utility, you can go to zero cost on the electricity bill. And also, likewise, if you also go full electrification of the building at the same time, then you cut out the entire gas bill, which means both the hot water, the furnace have to be electric. So you go to a full heat pump system there. And then also a kind of a challenge still going to an induction stove in the kitchen, which requires also some electric adjustments. So it's not straightforward, but you have incentives now from the Inflation Reduction Act. And today is the anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, but the incentives still live on quite a while. So technically for that, you can eliminate the whole gas and electricity bill. But of course, water is still an issue, right? So water could still be a factor, and you will not probably eliminate water use completely. But of course, you can have low flow water, like appliances, and also settings like in the bathroom, the shower, the toilets, and the faucets. There's a lot that you can save there, but you can't eliminate it. But just for orientation, in the US, the water use in homes is quite a bit higher than in other industrialized countries. So there is still room to minimize water use, definitely. And even waterless options available for some extreme situations. So I hope that gives some clarification. But of course, you cannot be certain of the utility savings. So you can only give like an approximation or like a middle of the road estimate. You don't want to give too much hope and say, oh, you will never again pay for electricity. And of course, if you disconnect from gas, you will actually not pay for gas. Again, that's a true. But of course, you will stay connected to the power grid. And so there you rely on a certain amount of sunshine per year. And there can also be situations where people get more lax with their energy use when they think, oh, I have solar on the roof, and they think, oh, it's free, and then all of a sudden they use a lot more. So that can backfire. So you still have to be a little bit aware of what you use and how much. So the question about whether there's a need to be certified to call a home a green home. So I'm not a lawyer either. So I don't want to promise this for 100%. But as far as I understand, both the terms sustainable and green and clean, these are all not protected or legally defined terms. So as far as I know, you can call a home green home if and when you think it's a green home. But that's why it's very important that you have some knowledge and an official certification, such as by LEED or Energy Star or the Home Energy Score scoring system. These are very important to kind of provide some evidence in addition to just your word. Great. I think there were some great questions here, and I hope that this was helpful, Pam. Not sure. Did you have any more questions?
Nuts, I don't, but what I really took away is, as an agent, how do we sell green better? And that is to be knowledgeable, right? And to know, and there are ways to do that. And thank you for being here today, because you shared so many things. I'm really curious if I can have a wind turbine out in my yard, right? But what does a green or a greener home look like? And what are we looking for? So and to listen out. Is right sizing, by the way, a term? If not, I think we should start coining that term, right sizing. I think so. Um, so I didn't have any more questions, but I do know how to reach you. And I hope our listeners and those who tune in after the fact um, know how to reach you by going to your POCACITO, www.pocacito, POCACITO.org to learn more about what you're doing. I know you have this fantastic project. I think it's happening out in Texas. Was it this summer? I'm trying to.
Yeah, so yeah, we're doing something in later in the fall in Texas and in Louisiana. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah. And then
Oh,
next year again in Mississippi will be next year again, hopefully. So
yeah.
but we hope to also do things in Virginia, of course. And if people are interested in collaborations, feel free to reach out or have follow-up questions or want to hear about any ideas for example homes to look at, etc., in depending where you are. So I don't know the whole US, of course, but I've been in a few places and so happy to interact wherever you are dialing in from. And you're
Mm,
totally right, Pam. It's just, I think it's a kind of education opportunity and challenge for real estate agents because obviously you can't become like a building engineer, an architect, and know every detail and um, every aspect of every technical item of the house system, but having some starting knowledge, knowing a little bit what this is about and what the customer might want to see. I think that will be really important. And I actually believe this will become even more important in the future with more extreme weather events and people being more aware of the potential costs also of being exposed to climate impacts without adequate responses set up.
mm, mm. Thank you. And you know, you mentioned being a collaborator with projects, and that's why we're here today at EXP Climate Action Network. Is we want to collaborate with you, and we want people to collaborate with you, right? So it's a ripple effect that's going to make a difference as we start to share what we all know. And as we start to wrap up, everybody, I just want to let you know that we will have a booth at the EXP Con. And on Thursday, let me look at my notes, October 5th from 9 to 12, we will have a breakout section. And stay tuned, please, for a big surprise. And I think with that, Max, we have a couple of minutes left, but I think we could all, you know, an extra 5 minutes in our day would not be bad. I thank you for tuning in. I know you're out of town today. You're up in DC, and but this was fantastic, and we truly, truly appreciate everybody showing up, and Max for you being a part of what we're doing.
Thank you, Pam. And I just wanted to say also that I really appreciate that you and the whole network of real estate agents are looking into being climate active and knowledgeable and engaged. I think this is so important because the building sector is a big part of our, if you want to, climate footprint in the world. And
Mhm.
most people don't think of it that much. And if we really want to go and make inroads into our full greenhouse gas emissions and our other environmental impacts, this is really an important part of the solution. And this is so complex, but at the same time, everybody has somewhere where they live. So, you know,
Mm,
you have a home. And so this is something everybody can also relate to. So it's very, very crucial. And I think this will become really a very important topic, both for you guys, but also for my profession. And so I hope we can do more together in the future, because there's really a lot more that needs to be done.
I agree. Well, again, Max, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Look forward to what's coming up September, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.